Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have some fun with UFOs. Something we never done before on this show, but I thought it would be something interesting, or just to kind of change the pace here. It's amazing that 50 years after the incident at Roswell, the UFO sightings at Roswell, New Mexico, a recent CNN Tom Warner poll actually has, not Tom Warner, Times, actually has 80% of Americans think that the government is hiding something about the Roswell incident and hiding some information about extraterrestrial activities there. But at the same time, if you ask people, do they believe in UFOs, you will have over 80% who will say, no, they don't believe it. And they even equate UFOs with Bigfoot. Now, where do you stand? Do you believe in UFOs? Or are you like me, believing that it could be something out there, but we don't know what it is? UFO, the definition of UFO is, the term is, it means unidentified flying object. Now, of course, about 90 to 95% of those sightings reported, it will turn out to be something that people can explain what it was, even though it was a funny looking airplane. Maybe you looked at this airplane in a different angle. Maybe it was an experimental military plane. Maybe your eyes were playing tricks on you. But then we have the 5% that are unidentifiable, not even by those experts who could not identify these flying objects as a human-made object. Now, even with these unidentifiable objects, some of them, we're not saying that all of them are extraterrestrial or came from outer space, but some of them might be explainable. It could be a military experiment, it could be anything, but not all of them are actually came or from outer space. But then you have a lot of people who believe that these things are really come from outer space because of different things about these saucers. Some of them, the shapes are, there are different shapes for these UFOs. Some of them, they look like the normal, regular saucer that you have seen while you were a kid in a lot of movies. Some of them are a black triangular. Some of them, they look like a tube. But one thing about all these UFOs, or unidentifiable or identified flying objects, one thing about these is they don't have the same characteristics as airplanes. For instance, they would move a lot faster than an airplane. They would just whiz from one side to another side within seconds, which is, so far, we do not know that humans have made planes to go that fast, and in some cases, even humans will not be able to handle the speed in which these UFOs travel in. So what these could be, we do have a lot of experts out there, and these people are not, they did not take this as a hobby. Some of these people actually were in the United States Air Force, and they have chased a few of these saucers. And with us tonight to tell us about what he thinks about UFOs is one of the best researchers that we can find on this subject, Major George Filer, United States Air Force. He's retired, but he has done a lot of extensive search on UFOs, and he believes that they do exist. And we're going to find out from George, from Major Filer, if these UFOs actually exist and what his proof is that they do exist. I don't know where you stand on these things, but you are welcome to call and question our guest and ask our guest about the information you will be hearing. The number will be flashed on the screen here in a second. But let's go to Major Filer. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Thank you. Now, Major Filer, you are a United States Air Force pilot that actually chased one of those things over London at one time?
Well, I was actually a navigator on an aircraft that was asked by London Control to chase the UFO. That it was over the central part of England. We were flying tankers, and we were up.
Please enter your destination number now.
Okay. Apparently, we lost Major Fowler. We'll get him back. That's phone lines for you. The new AT&T. But anyhow, we're going to have Major Fowler with us back in a second. Apparently, we got disconnected. Okay. Now, I don't know where you stand on UFOs, but apparently there is something out there because CNN covered it. You have ABC covered it, Nightline covered it, and ABC covered it more than one time. CNN actually did a lot of... so there is something out there, but always, whenever they covered it, they cover it in such a way to prove, even though, at the end, they will make comment as, Bigfoot or, equate it with these myths. And, but, my position on it is there could be something out there. And we also go on to get into the religious aspect of this, that would this, if there are people out there, would this actually interfere with our religious beliefs and stuff. Major, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Yes.
I guess
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Didn't want to hear my story.
Yes, go ahead. That's probably some of these UFO people out there. They're interfering with us.
Right. I was just saying that we were flying tankers over England, and frequently the squadron would get asked to investigate a UFO, and that we dove on one that under London Control giving us an intercept, and I picked it up on the aircraft radar, and it was a very large return, like a large bridge. It was compared to the Firth of Forth Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge or any large bridge like that was on our radar, and so it was an indication because of the radar that it was a very large object, half a mile long or so, and was made of some kind of metal that gave us the return. And then we saw it off in the distance with lights around it. When we got about a mile or so away from it, it just suddenly flew off into space, something like the shuttle launch that you see at night.
Okay. And
London Control said to go ahead on with your mission.
So now let me ask you this. I mean, is this normal that United States Air Force would be dispatched to go check out some UFOs all over the world, or in whatever countries they are stationed in?
Well, it happens frequently that Air Forces chase these unknown objects, unidentified objects, to determine what they are.
And where do these objects go?
Well, they usually go up into space, or certainly away from us at thousands of miles an hour. But even our fastest fighters are unable to catch them.
Okay. Now, what is the possibility of these being like a military experiment going on and they do not want you to know about it? Would the Air Force know about like secret military aircraft?
Well, normally they would know. There's some aircraft, of course, that you might say the normal air crews are not aware of, the experimental aircraft. But normally they fly, out of Area 51 or areas that are known to be...
They would not be flying over Alabama.
Experimental aircraft are flying out of.
Okay.
Are they?
I mean, they would not be flying over cities like Chicago, for instance, or in Alabama or Illinois or any other states. It will be.
Well,
like
it's unlikely that they would be. As
okay.
Certainly not. We get 500 reports a month over the internet of people seeing usually low-flying craft, less than 1,000 feet high, frequently very large objects. Almost daily we get reports of
now, how many
larger than football fields, bigger than anything.
Okay.
That,
how many of these 500? How many of these 500 reports that you get every month actually turned out to be hoax?
Hoax?
Yes.
Well, very few that we know of.
Okay. Now, what about the rest? Could it be like just somebody saw an airplane and thought it was a UFO?
Yes, we know that some of the cases are, I don't like to use the word hoax, but, mistaken identity. One of the objects that is frequently misidentified are these advertising blimps with large lettering or lights on the sides. From a distance, they can appear, something like a spaceship or whatever. And that when we investigate, I'm part of an organization called MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and we try to determine where these blimps are located and what they're doing. But usually the descriptions are that these craft are flying at such high speeds, at least when they leave us, that it's unlikely to be a blimp.
Okay. Now, if these crafts actually came from outer space, they would have to have broken that would normally a human being, like the speed of light, they would have to surpass the speed of light, correct?
Well, first of all, let's kind of look at the universe. There's virtually thousands of galaxies, and each galaxy has millions, if not billions, of stars. And our own solar system has like 8 planets. So we're talking, in terms of just the Milky Way, our own galaxy may have something like 30 billion Earth-like planets. And it's logical to assume that many of these developed, hundreds, if not thousands of years ahead of us, so that they may have developed the ability to travel at the speed of light, or even, or near the speed of light. And there's a strange thing that occurs, that when you get near the speed of light, time kind of warps, and that it may only take a comparatively short time to reach here from the nearer stars. For example, something like 6 weeks for the time aboard the craft. Now, when these same astronauts would return to their planet, maybe 100 years had gone by, but the actual time on board the craft would be comparatively short in terms of in weeks. And Magellan and the other, explorers at one time took years to travel around the Earth. So it's the distances and time factors are not as great as a lot of scientists believe.
Okay. Now let me ask you this: do you believe that we have been visited by people from outer space? I mean, not people, but entities from outer space?
Well, I can only tell you that I saw an object that I couldn't explain as being from Earth, and that it's illogical to assume that it is from outer space. We've already discovered some 200 planets outside our solar system, and they're finding new planets almost every day.
Okay. Now, my follow-up question to that, we started with this UFO thing back in 1947. And now before, I mean, throughout history, I mean, thousands of years ago, even people have mentioned, the chariots of fire, in the sky, the fallen angels. And so we've seen that, people have talked about objects in the sky for a long time. But let's get back to our century here, or the previous century. We very much started this thing back in 1947. And you would think, and you're telling me you're getting about 500 reports a month or so. What are these entities doing? Are they studying Earth for 50 years? I mean, they're kind of slow, huh?
Well, we think they're doing a lot of things. That this is kind of a way station in space, and it's a wonderful place to visit type thing. And they are studying us, but they seem to have problems with reproducing.
Okay.
And there's indications that they're taking sperm and eggs from humans and reproducing with aliens to form what amounts to as hybrids.
Okay, George. Now, I believe everything you said until this point. How do we know that they're doing that?
Well, we have literally hundreds of people who claim to be abductees. I've researched the subject with a Dr. David Jacobs from Temple University, and on a regular basis he interviews people who make these claims. Now, I'll admit that these are a little bit far-fetched, and the first 50 or so people that I met, I didn't believe, and
so you met 50...
bluntly, I've never seen an alien personally.
So you met...
I did see what I feel is likely to be an alien craft.
Okay. Now, you met 50 people...
You're asking me what they're doing. I'm just speculating that one of the things they appear to be doing is, mining Earth. They often are seen diving.
Did you say mining? Did you say mining Earth? So they're actually taking our resources here?
Yes, using some of our resources. That the Earth has many resources that could be valuable to an alien group coming here.
Like
some indication
what?
that they don't have their own planet, that they're just, might say, in space, aboard spaceships moving about.
Well, I mean, they came from somewhere.
Well, they did originally, obviously, but their
well, I mean,
planet
these spaceships, these spaceships can't last forever. It has to be mechanical objects, so it's going to have tear and wear on it. So where do they go to fix it?
Well, we often have reports of craft diving into the ocean, and when we attempt to discover what they're doing, they appear to be, doing repairs and so on underneath the ocean.
Who's doing repairs?
Pardon me?
Who's doing the repairs underneath the ocean?
Oh, the aliens, our visitors, so to speak.
Okay, so now, are you telling me now that they live in the ocean?
We get reports of high-speed underwater craft as well as, high-speed craft in our atmosphere and in space. The shuttle on a regular basis takes video of what appear to be alien craft moving at thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of miles an hour.
Okay.
A lot of these can be, seen on my website at the National UFO Center. In other words, we have, each week we get a dozen or so photos that come in.
Now let me ask you this. We're going to put the your website on the screen. What is it? The National UFO Center.org?
.com.
Okay. Now let's get into has these entities. Do you know if they have communicated with our government?
Well, I have no personal knowledge that we had stories to that effect that various presidents have been communicated with. But I have no first-hand knowledge to that effect.
Okay.
I do know that both President Carter and President Reagan claimed to have seen UFOs, and obviously many other people. There's a whole
Okay. Did you say that
group of rock
President?
stars and
Did you say President Carter and President Reagan, they claimed to have seen UFOs?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you tell me, while I was talking to you on the phone, did you say that other countries are more open about UFOs than the States?
Yes. France, England, China, almost all the South American countries, Mexico,
Okay.
even Canada, and so on.
And you said they do communicate with all these countries, with all the people in these countries?
Well, I can't say with all of them, but I do communicate with many people on a regular basis. For example, Brian Vike in Canada, he's already gotten 300 sightings in Canada so far this year. In other words, it's not only in the United States that people see UFOs, but they see them pretty much all over the world.
Okay. So how did this communications, if these aliens actually communicate with the people, do they communicate with them in English or in their own language?
Well, you might say it's in their own language. Usually people claim that they can hear them talking, you might say, inside their mind, kind of a mental telepathy, so that they get their point across to the people. Usually they're telling them not to be afraid and that they won't hurt them, and that they're just doing experiments and so on.
Okay. So these people actually, now do we know, I mean, you talked about them getting sperms and abducting people and, to reproduce, and they must be closer to us physiologically if they're using us to reproduce themselves. Now, the pictures that we see, I mean, it's artist drawings, and normally the kind of elongated face with the small eyes and stuff. Where did that figure come from?
Well, some people claim to see the grays, which are the ones you are discussing, but many people describe very human-looking aliens that you might say could pass on the street, and you might think that they look a little odd, but we frequently see people on the street who look a little odd.
Yeah,
and,
all the time.
They seem to, if we're correct in our assumptions, that they seem to be building this hybrid race of people who are, you might say, half human and half alien, referred to as hybrids, and that they can come and live amongst us, so to speak.
Do you have suspicion?
I will admit that the proof for this is a lot less than the other proof of just seeing the craft, and there's some question of exactly what they are doing.
Okay. I mean, have you studied, or has anyone studied, maybe we came from whatever these people come from?
Well, a lot of people don't believe in evolution as we know it, and many people believe in a creator. Well, a creator, at least I, believe that God is big enough to create civilizations throughout the universe.
Of course, I mean, no question about that, yes.
And that he very easily could have, brought life here to Earth at some time in the past.
Well, I mean, could we have been a spaceship that that crashed into Earth millions of years ago?
Well, some people feel that the story of the Ark in the Old Testament actually refers to a spacecraft that came here. That whatever the planet was being flooded, and they got various animals, and 2x2 kangaroos and giraffes and all that, and got aboard the spaceship and flew here to Earth. Now, whether that's true is just speculation, of course. Other countries are doing studies in depth with generals and scientists and looking at this very closely. For example, France has the COMITA report, which stands for the Committee for In-Depth Studies, and it's led by General Bruno Lemoyne, who was a former head of the Air Force, and Admiral Mark Merlo, and a whole series of PhDs and so on, and they put together this study, which has not been really mentioned in the United States in the news media. I think a Boston paper mentioned it, but in effect they're saying that the fact that aliens are visiting Earth is a fact, and that it should be studied in detail. Now, when I was in the Air Force, we had Project Blue Book, and every base had a UFO officer, and when the reports would come in like we're getting today, a UFO officer would go out and investigate. And when I was stationed at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, my boss, Bob Woods, was a UFO officer.
What is the Blue Book project?
Well, that was a study of UFOs to determine what they were, and the Air Force's General Twining issued a report that he felt that, and the Air Force felt that they were extraterrestrial objects.
Now, let me ask you this. With this Blue Book project, is the intention, and you have UFO officers, was the intention to that just go and identify this flying object, or actually they had in mind that we are being visited by someone from outside of this world?
Well, the 1947 report by General Twining said that they appear to be extraterrestrials. Obviously, we don't know as much as we would like to.
Okay.
And I would ask your listeners to keep an open mind that this is something that's being researched by, many of us, but we can always use help from the scientific community or anyone who's interested in studying.
Now, okay, let me ask you this.
System.
It has been 60 years since 1947. Now, or 50 years actually, 60 years. What am I trying to say here? How come governments are not telling the people what they know or what they don't know, but they speculate? How come governments are not telling the people, be upfront with the people? I mean, to me, if I know that there are people who are on Earth and visiting us from other space, from other planets, so what? I mean, I'm not going to go crazy and, go on the, big chaos and stuff. It's not going to be. This is 2007, and I think people living now different than those who lived back in 1947, where even airplanes were still at an early stage, so to speak. So now people know that there are planets out there, and we have space shuttles. We are actually going into space now. But in 1947, they probably thought, if you tell somebody that we're going to go to the moon, they probably would have laughed at you. But now we went to space, we went to the moon and beyond. So it's okay. If we know there are people out there, hey, welcome. So why the governments are not telling us?
Well, certain countries, for example, China has gone to the United Nations and asked the United Nations to study the problem openly. interestingly enough, the United States did not want that to occur. I don't know their exact reasons, but I think it goes back to, if you're referring to Roswell, that likely a crash occurred at that time, and President Truman at that time decided that, we don't know what's going on. Is this going to be an invasion or what? Let's keep it quiet from the public.
What was at Roswell, at Area 51, what was there before this supposedly crashed? What was in that area before?
Well, the Air Force had a base at Roswell,
okay,
New Mexico.
So we assume...
Which was the 509th Heavy Bombardment Wing, was the group that had bombed Japan during World War II with the nuclear weapons. So it was very, you might say it was our best long-range bomber group at Roswell.
Okay. So we assume that these entities who crashed at at Roswell, they knew that this was an American Air Force base, and they probably needed some mechanical repairs or something.
It was our only, nuclear capable base in the Air Force at the time.
So
and
maybe these entities, their machines work on nuclear?
Well, we don't know exactly how they operate. They seem to be anti-gravity. They maneuver and go at such speeds that they seem to be able to overcome gravity in some way. And then they have other propulsion systems that may be nuclear.
Okay. Now, what about, I've heard and I read some stories, and you wrote an article about an autopsy that was actually conducted on one of those beings. What do you think? Do you think that was it was one of those entities, or was that a hoax?
Well, I think that there were bodies at Roswell. A production group in England tried to, you might say, have a hoax claiming that it was that particular autopsy, and made a lot of money. That's one of the problems in the field, is that certain production companies, can make movies or whatever and try to get money for it. Unfortunately, there's very little money for the actual research, and that's like any subject needs money for, to pay scientists and so on.
Now, didn't you actually talk to somebody who actually took some pictures during Roswell, the Roswell incident?
Well, I've talked to people whose parents were at Roswell, who were pilots and the like there. And, for example, I talked to Lieutenant Walter Haught himself, who was the public relations officer at the base, and he has essentially told us that he saw alien body in an alien craft, in 1947 in the hangar there, and that all the stories about Roswell are in fact true. And although I didn't see it, I choose to believe Lieutenant Haught and other people who gave me reason to believe that the story is true.
Okay. Now, why is it most of these sightings are actually in an English-speaking countries? Like, for instance, Europe, North America. It's true, you see some like from South Africa, and you mentioned China. But most of these sightings and most of these UFO visitors, it seems that they like to come around English-speaking people?
Well, we get a lot of reports from Russia, Poland, Italy, France, Spain, most of the European countries. almost any of the countries that have, computers and the internet. India, we're starting to get quite a few reports from. I just got one from South Africa, from a sergeant on the police force in South Africa. I haven't gotten any from Darfur, countries that are obviously poor and that don't have this capability. And even if they sent me a report, I probably couldn't, translate. But we get quite a few reports from the Middle East, Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, different countries like that. Obviously not as many, but we do get reports.
Okay, so to your knowledge, has any country officially decided or told its people that they're for real? Has any country actually came out and said it's our official stand that UFOs are for real?
Well, most countries, even the United States, claims that there's objects in the sky that are not unidentified, but they do not present a threat to this country. France is probably the one that's come the closest to admitting that they exist, and will probably be the country that first announces it to the world. They've come very close to doing that.
Now, to your knowledge, do you know if the United Nations have or has a protocol to that all countries have signed to keep this in secret until the world as one entity decides to make this out there in the open and tell the people around it? Do you know of any protocols that countries have to sign or had to sign?
I'm not aware of any, but I think they choose to do so, rather than create. Some people feel that if the announcement is given, that it will create a lot of problems concerning religion and economics, and probably the biggest problem is with scientists, because much of what scientists know, for example, with the Darwinian theories and the like, will in effect no longer be true, and that many of our laws, and so I'm talking about scientific laws, will have to change. That there'll be a very large change in our scientific world if all this exists.
Now, have you heard about these two scientists in Germany that supposedly, at least in theory, have broken the speed of light?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay, now, how would that...
That's been done also in a lot of laboratories.
Okay, now how would that play in your understanding of UFOs?
Well, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, it would require an infinite amount of energy to propel an object at more than 186,000 miles per second. And Dr. Gunther Nimitz and Dr. Alfons Stolfhoven of the University of Koblenz say that they have been able to breach a key tenet of the theory, that they've been able to make microwave photons travel much faster than 186,000 miles per second. One interesting thing is that we talked to abductees who claim to have been aboard these craft, and one of the things that they often say is that when the craft gets out in space a ways, it becomes quite small. You might say the size of a basketball. Here's this thing that's maybe a mile long or something, and it's shortened and compressed, and it's able to go at much faster speeds because it's such a small object moving through space.
Okay, so now, and these abductees, I guess they become, what, about quarter of an inch tall?
Well, they mentioned the size of a basketball, that it was...
Well, I mean, if you put everybody, these abductees and everything else in this mile-long space craft when it's on Earth and it becomes a basketball, then I guess they become... Now, how would science explain that?
Well, it's a little bit like... let's say that you were Benjamin Franklin, 200 years ago in the United States, and were considered the greatest scientist in the country and one of the greatest minds. And then all of a sudden, 200 years later, you come into to Earth, and you're in, for example, your studio there, and you see a television, you see computers and everything. In some way, knowledge is passed over the TV screen, and you can see somebody,
okay,
on the moon or whatever. In other words,
okay, that's fine. I understand that analogy, and that's perfect.
So I'm saying that they apparently can actually
now let me
do roughly the same with their craft.
Okay.
In other words, they can make it small.
Okay, that's fine. Now, I mean, I understand the analogy of the TV and the technology that we have. If somebody from 200 years ago would, he'll freak out. But if this thing got to be a basketball size and all these people are in it, then with their relative sizes, they would not see it as a basketball. They would still see it as a huge spacecraft, because their sizes would have to be, if they shrink these sizes, then their sizes would be much, much smaller, relatively speaking here. So how would they know a basketball size when they are only like a quarter of an inch tall?
I don't know. I'm just telling you the stories they tell me. It's interesting.
That doesn't make sense. If my body shrinks to be a 1/4 of an inch, within the space that I'm in, then I'm still relatively going to see the same space around me.
Right. In some way, they create these subatomic particles, and break us all down into very miniature type persons and craft, and send it through the space at the speed of light. I don't know if this is true. I'm just telling you what I've been told from, interestingly enough, people in Sweden and...
Okay, well now the next question is, if these objects, if these crafts are traveling at the speed of light, or even, broke the speed of light, now humanly, our human bodies will not be able, my understanding that our human bodies will not be able to do that, correct? To travel in the speed of light or faster.
It's impossible, but 200 years from now, maybe they can send us through the wires, so to speak, or even in space.
But physiologically speaking, today, if you put me in 186,000 kilometer per hour or per second, then we're talking about here, so fast that our bodies will not be able to handle it. And I'm just wondering, how these abductees' bodies were able to handle that speed?
Now, the people who go aboard the craft, they have detailed descriptions. And what's interesting is, I would be at Dr. Jacobs' home, and we might interview 50 people or whatever at one time, and these people would come from all over the area, and they would have very similar stories even though they didn't know each other. And one part of the story that they often mention is that they would be put into a cylinder-like device that would hold a body, and within the cylinder was some kind of a liquid, and when they traveled, they would be in this liquid cylinder, so to speak.
How do they breathe?
I don't know if that makes much sense, but...
it makes a lot of sense. Probably that's where the this liquid probably is the technology that we're looking for that would explain how they can travel that fast. But I'm just wondering how they can breathe unless they put them out for for an hour or two until they get to wherever
there's some way, I don't know how it works, but they claim that they can breathe in this liquid, even though it feels pretty much like water.
Maybe it's liquid oxygen. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Let's go back to the governments. Do you personally think that the leaders in the world, or at least in the United States, since it's the superpower, do you think there is like some sort of an agreement between our government and whatever entity is out there, or entities?
Well, I don't have any knowledge of it, one way or the other. But I kind of doubt it. But it happened
what about the hybrid people that you talked about? What about the hybrid people? Do you think we have some hybrid people on Earth now?
Well, it makes sense that we do, yes.
Okay, so we assume if they're going to send down some hybrid people, they're not going to send them down in the streets of L.A. to go, work as street sweepers. They would probably put them in a good place in a government or something. So do you think we have, Paul Wolfowitz does look funny. Even George Bush looks funny. So, are these people hybrid? I'm just joking here.
I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but, anything's possible.
Okay.
But,
okay.
All I know is that people see the craft regularly in, every state in the Union, including Louisiana. We had a report from East Baton Rouge not long ago of a disc-shaped craft flying over at low level in Baton Rouge. I'm just saying that...
I wonder if any of my viewers here ever witnessed anything right here in Lafayette. Of course, they're welcome to call us and share that information with us. Now, okay, where does this... do you see it maybe in the next 10 years, 20 years? Because CNN actually did have some segments. Larry King not long ago had the UFO show, I think 2-3 weeks ago or something. And then, do you know about the O'Hara Airport incident?
Yes, somewhat.
Okay, that supposedly an aircraft actually hovered over the airport and then took off or something. Can you tell me briefly about that?
Yes, there's...
And actually, CNN did interview some people who actually saw this thing.
Right, there's quite a few people who actually saw it. A lot of, air crew people taxiing aircraft and the like. I believe it was United Terminal that I think that's C at O'Hara Airport, and quite a few people who were in that position saw the disc above them at O'Hara.
Okay.
And reported it
now,
to the
your
FAA
knowledge
and the local news and the like.
Okay, to your knowledge, has been any explanation from the government as to what it was?
Not to my knowledge. I think they said it could possibly be some kind of a weather phenomenon, but the people who saw it said that it was impossible, that they saw, a metallic craft hovering above the airport. And that's what people see, that there's... I get reports from pilots from commercial airlines and military pilots and crews that see things, and obviously they don't want their names used. And as a matter of fact, a commercial pilot, if he stood up in front of everybody and announced it on the radio, he'd probably get fired. But these people do see things, and they let us know about it.
Okay. And, George, we have about 4 minutes left. I'm going to go to the phones. We have some callers waiting to talk to you. Let's go to Freedom on One. Go ahead, Freedom.
Oh, yes. May I ask Major Follow a question.
Sure.
Back in the 1960s, Major Follow, the Brookings Institute gave a report apparently to the federal government saying that if people of the United States was revealed that UFO existed, that it would change our belief in religion. Do you think, as of 2007, if that report was released that there were aliens, do you think that would have a profound effect on the religious people today? Thanks very much.
Good question.
Well, I think there'd be some, certainly some strong thinking about it on an individual level. And I've thought about it myself, and I decided that, my God is large enough to have many civilizations, and that angels spoke in the Bible, and New Testament, Old Testament, the Quran and so on, indicate that extraterrestrials were coming here from someplace else. Now, I feel that one of the places they came from is what is referred to as heaven, and that God exists and He created us. And I think that most people who are religious can accept that.
Now, why would
exists,
that conflict? Why would that conflict with religion? I mean, my religion is I'm a Muslim, and it would not conflict with my belief if there are actually people on other planets. Why would it conflict with the Christian religion?
I don't think, in fact, that it would in detail. I don't happen to, that was a long time ago, and people had a little narrower view, and, you might say heaven was this wonderful place in space, and depending on the interpretation of the Bible, for example, Dake's annotated reference Bible speaks of heaven as a planet, with
but I mean, plus we don't
horses
know,
and all the rest of it. In other words,
we don't know,
exists.
We don't know about all God's creations. We know what He allowed us to know. Correct?
Right.
I mean, at least in the Quran, it says, that He creates what you don't know. What He created what you don't know. And I'm sure, God is the same God. So what we know, it may not be everything that He knows, well, not may, but I mean, I'm sure it's not. So I don't see where it would conflict with religion. On the contrary, it might even strengthen people's beliefs that there is actually a God out there. So you don't see any conflict with spirituality here?
No, I mean, if you read between the lines, they're saying in effect that fallen angels visited Earth,
right,
and that makes sense as well. That some of the aliens are, I imagine, pretty much like people on Earth. Some are good guys and some are bad guys, and some have their own interests in, as primary, and that hopefully we'll all be together in the universe. I personally think if we knew that there was other civilizations, maybe we'd stop fighting among ourselves.
Yeah, really. Major Filer, unfortunately, we are completely out of time, but I hope to have you back here so we can continue to discuss this at another time.
Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Tillawi.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And we will definitely get back with you on another date. Thank you, sir. Good night.
I just ask people to keep an open mind, look at the National UFOcenter.com, and read it weekly, or I'm happy to send them an intelligence report weekly.
Thank you, sir. We're completely out of time.
I found a lot of people have changed their mind once they see the
Thursday at
large
7
number
at
of reports coming in.
See you then.
Hi, I'm Rose Hoffman Cormier, Health Information Center Coordinator of the Women's Foundation. The Women's Foundation is a local, private, non-profit organization dedicated to promoting health and well-being to women and their families. The Women's Foundation has various areas that they help people. We have a Health Information Center, which is a video pamphlet library on health